In the previous clip, we have added the meeting entity and we have migrated the database. Now let's create a meeting repository that we can use in the meeting detail view model to load and save meetings. So I expand here the data repositories folder that contains the generic repository class. We have created this class in the previous module. It contains the typical methods like add, getById async, has changes, and also remove and save async. Now I just right-click on the repositories folder to add a new class. I call this class meeting repository. I inherit this meeting repository class from the generic repository class and I use the meeting entity. I press Ctrl- to add a using directive for friend organizer model. As a data context, I want to use the friend organizer DB context. I press Ctrl- to add a using directive for friend organizer data access. Now I press Ctrl- again to generate the constructor in the meeting repository. The constructor of the generic repository class requires the DB context. Now I make this class public, and I also remove the unnecessary usings. When a meeting will be loaded, the getById async method will be called that is implemented in the generic repository base class. But this getById async method should also load the friends that are part of that meeting. So we go to the meeting repository class and we just override that getById async method. Here we can access the friend organizer DB context instance over the context field that is specified in the generic repository base class. From the context, I grab the meetings DB set, and on the DB set I call the include method to include the friends of a meeting. To be able to use this include method, I need to specify a using directive for system data entity, as this is an extension method. Now after the friends are included with this include method, I call the single async method, and I want to load the meeting with the ID that is specified over the ID parameter. The single async method is an asynchronous method, so we need to await it, and then I want to return it. As we are using the await keyword here, we need to specify our method as async. Now the meeting repository is done. I place the cursor on the class and I press Ctrl- to extract an interface. iMeeting repository sounds like a good name. I click OK. Now this interface should extend our iGeneric repository interface of meeting. This means I can also get rid of this getById async method that we have specified directly in this interface. When we go back to the meeting repository, you can see that this class implements now our new iMeeting repository interface. Now the final thing I want to set up before we continue with the meeting detail view model is the bootstrapper with AutoFag. We want to inject a meeting repository instance when an iMeeting repository is required. So let's open up the startup folder that contains our bootstrapper class. When I scroll down a bit here, you can already see the registration for the friend repository. I just copy that line and I register the type meeting repository as iMeeting repository. Now we are done with the meeting repository and we can continue with the meeting detail view model. In this demonstration, we will wrap the meeting entity with the meeting wrapper. Then we will create the meeting detail view model and also the meeting detail view. Adding and removing friends to a meeting is not part of this demonstration. We will focus on that topic in the next module when we build the pick list for this many-to-many relationship. Here we just try to display the meetings in the user interface with the title and the dates. Let's switch to Visual Studio and let's wrap the meeting entity. In the wrapper folder of the Friend Organizer UI project, I have already created this meeting wrapper class. As you can see, this class inherits from model wrapper of meeting. It has an ID property that returns the ID of the underlying model. And then it contains the three properties title, date from, and date to, like they are specified also on the meeting entity. These properties are using the getValue and setValue methods of the model wrapper base class to get and set the values with reflection. So the meeting wrapper is already here and we can continue with the meeting detail view model. In the View Model folder of the Friend Organizer UI project, I have already created the iMeeting Detail View Model interface and the Meeting Detail View Model class. Let's first look at the iMeeting Detail View Model. As you can see, this interface just extends the iDetail View Model interface, And as you might remember, the iDetailViewModel interface defines the loadAsync method and the hasChanges property. Now let's look at the implementation of the meetingDetailViewModel class. As you can see, this class inherits from DetailViewModelBase, the base class that we have created in the previous module. It also implements the iMeetingDetailViewModel interface. The constructor takes an iEvent aggregator and passes that instance to the DetailViewModelBase constructor. It also takes an iMessageDialogService and stores it in the private field _messageDialogService. The third parameter is of type iMeetingRepository. That's the repository that we have created in this module. The instance is stored in the _meetingRepository field. When I scroll down, you can see that the meetingDetailViewModel class has a meeting property that is of type meetingWrapper. In the previous clip, you have seen this meeting wrapper that just wraps the meeting model. In the loadAsync method, a meeting is loaded. The loadAsync method takes the meeting ID that is a nullable int. If the meeting ID has a value, the getById async method of the meeting repository instance is called to load that meeting with this ID. If the meeting ID does not have a value, the createNewMeeting method is called. When I scroll down, you can see that createNewMeeting method here. In this method, a new meeting object is created, it is added to the meeting repository, and then this instance is returned. So when I scroll up to the loadAsync method again, we have here a meeting instance. Either one loaded from the database or a newly created one. Then the initializeMeeting method is called and the meeting instance is passed to that method. I scroll down to the initializeMeeting method. As you can see, in this method a new meeting wrapper is created for that meeting and the meeting wrapper is stored in the meeting property of the meetingDetailViewModel. Also an event handler for the property changed event is installed. That event handler updates the hasChanges property of the meetingDetailViewModel with the return value of the hasChanges method of the meeting repository. It also raises the canExecuteChanged event of the save command if the hasErrors property of the meeting wrapper has changed. Also at the end of this initializeMeeting method, the canExecuteChanged event for the save command is raised by calling the raised_canExecuteChanged method. So far to the loading logic and to this initializeMeeting method. Now let's look what else we have in this meetingDetailViewModel. Here you see the onDeleteExecute method that is an override from the onDeleteExecute method of the DetailViewModel base class. This method displays an OK cancel dialog. Do you really want to delete the meeting? If the user clicks OK, the meeting model is removed from the meeting repository, the saveAsync method is called on the meeting repository, and the raisDetailDeleted method of the base class is called for that meeting ID. When I right click on that method and I say go to definition, you can see that this method in the DetailViewModel base class publishes the afterDetailDeleted event. In this case with the meeting ID, and the viewModel name is in this case the meetingDetailViewModel. Now let's go back to the meetingDetailViewModel class. When I scroll down, you can see the onSaveCanExecute method also overridden from the DetailViewModel base class. If the meeting property is not null and if the meeting doesn't have any errors, and if the hasChanges property of our meetingDetailViewModel is true, then the save command can be executed. The onSaveExecute method contains the logic for the save command. Inside of that method, the saveAsync method of the meeting repository is called. The hasChanges property is updated with the return value from the hasChanges method of the meeting repository, and the raisDetailSaved event method of the DetailViewModel base class is called with the meeting ID and the title. So far, this is the logic that is in the meetingDetailViewModel. We don't have the logic to add friends to a meeting or to remove friends from a meeting yet. We will implement this logic in the next module. Here we just focus on the meeting on its own. So now as we have this meetingDetailViewModel, let's specify the meetingDetailView. In the View folder of the Friend Organizer UI project, I have already created the meetingDetailView user control. This user control is used to display the details of a meeting. It will have the meetingDetailViewModel in the data context. So you can see here a text box that binds to the meeting property, which contains the meeting wrapper, and it grabs the title property of that meeting wrapper. Here is a date picker that binds to the dateFrom property of the meeting wrapper and another date picker that binds to the date_to property of the meeting wrapper. Then this view contains two buttons that are binding to the properties Save Command and Delete Command of the Meeting Detail View model. So the Meeting Detail View is already done, but there is one issue here. The date picker does not allow the user to select a time. They can only select a date. But I think you agree that a meeting normally starts at a specific time. So instead of using a date picker, we should use a date time picker. But WPF does not contain such a control, but we can get it over NuGet. So I right-click on the references of the Friend Organizer UI project and I select Manage NuGet Packages. I click on Browse and I search for Extended WPF Toolkit. Here we see the Extended WPF Toolkit NuGet package. I install the latest stable version. Now I go back to the Meeting Detail View and I just type here Date Time Picker. You see the light bulb appears and I press Ctrl- to add the XML namespace schemas exceed com WPF SAML toolkit. I hit enter. Now when I scroll up you can see that new XML namespace here. I click on the alias and I press F2. I want to rename it to toolkit. I scroll down again and the date time picker doesn't have a selected date property, it just has a value property. I also changed the other date picker to toolkit date time picker and I changed the selected date property to value. Now the Meeting Detail View is like I want it to be. Let's go to the main window and let's hook it up. In the main window we are using implicit data templates to wire up a view model with a view, like here the Friend Detail View model with the Friend Detail View. So I just copy this to create another implicit data template, in this case for the Meeting Detail View model. And I want to use the Meeting Detail View for that Meeting Detail View model. So now we are done with the Meeting Detail View model and the Meeting Detail View. The next step is to allow the user to open up a meeting. And to be able to do this, he needs to see meetings in the navigation. This means now we will extend the Navigation View model and the Navigation View.